brought to you by the writers and producers of independent by design, art and stories of indie game creation. This is the Indie by Design podcast, the show about game design and game designers. In each episode, we sit down with interesting people to talk in depth about them, their games, and their outlook on games. This episode is all about Devolver Digital. Devolver only began life following the death of another company. Gathering of Developers was a publisher fueled by the idea that it was possible to create a relationship between developer and publisher in such a way as to allow the creator full control over their project. Unfortunately, Gathering quickly disintegrated following its acquisition in 2000 by Take-Two Interactive. Founders left, and Gathering became a part of the Take-Two-owned 2K Games brand. Devolver was later started by the founders of Gathering, and with that same core philosophy of allowing creators the full freedom to deliver the kinds of games they wanted to make. Graeme Struthers is part of the small core team at Devolver, and he took the time to talk to us about the philosophy that guides the team, the story behind the publisher, and his own outlook on the games industry. Here he is, detailing his early experiences of the games industry, a structure he has been a part of for over 20 years. We do sincerely apologise for the background noise in this episode.
I mean, I remember when I was leaving college, that world was, everything seemed to be kind of like streamlining you into certain careers, and you needed to have certain qualifications. You needed to fit into quite rigid kind of roles, I guess. And the video games industry was so fresh and young, and had yet to really define any of those things. So for me, it was like, it really was. It was like almost like too good to be true, because you could get into that industry. So you could, go and specialise in PR or marketing or sales, and that's when it was a more traditional games industry, where people were going into retailers and selling them games. And for me personally, again, it was like my interest was travel. My interest was international. It was, to me, the idea that I could get paid money, but also get paid money to go and be in France or Germany or Spain or Italy or Russia or America. It was just like...
How did you find out how to even get into the games industry in the first place?
I was working for a retailer. Actually, ironically, the reason I was working for them was I studied photography, and when I left college, there really wasn't a great demand for photographers, surprisingly. So I started working in a shop, selling cameras. And that retailer was Dixon's, and they also sold other things, TVs, videos, hi-fis, whatever. And they did have a small section in all their stores for selling computers. And so I kind of gravitated over there anyway, like naturally, because it was interesting. And then over time, I percolated through the organisation into the head office. And all the fun seemed to happen in marketing and buying. And again, ironically, although they were selling sort of hardware, they didn't have anyone buying software, because no one was interested. The classic buyers were buying TVs and videos and brown goods, that kind of stuff. So even there, it was a kind of indication that you could make your own job. So I just basically became a software buyer. Then I started to meet all the different companies, publishers, and they all seemed to be having a great time. So I kind of like made my way over to that side. And again, most people I know in the games industry that have been around for a while, they've all come into it in sort of like quite circuitous routes. And once you're in it, I don't know why you'd want to leave it, personally.
So who were you working for at that point? Because you didn't just jump straight into Devolver.
No, I joined Virgin Interactive, which was still at that point owned by Richard Branson. And quite quickly he sold it, but the name was retained. So I worked at Virgin Interactive, and I was there for 4 years. And during that time, I got to focus on working on Command & Conquer with Westwood Studios. And again, to me, kind of like the fact that I went to Vegas fairly frequently to catch up with Westwood Studios was just sort of like, somewhat otherworldly. Yeah. And we also, at that point, we used to take care of LucasArts. So, you got to work on games that, Monkey Island, Command and Conquer, and then obviously work with Charles Cecil on Broken Sword. So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Were they the kind of games you were into, like personally? Like
Personally,
playing?
yeah. I mean, look, I've never really. I don't feel I've got a specific genre that I've kind of like focused on. I mean, strategy games are probably consistent over all the time we've been involved in video games. I still play. But I'm kind of a bit of a, I don't know what the right word is it a magpie that's attracted to glittery things? You know, if you put me in front of, Monkey Island, or Day of the Tentacle, I'm very, very happy. Put me in front of Quake, I'm very happy. So, yeah.
Yeah. So Devolver's only a small group of people. I think it's 5?
10 now.
10,
We've aggressively grown the company to 10 people.
Yeah. So how do you get in then on a? Because it's not like the kind of company that you see. Okay, we're advertising for jobs now. We want this person. I mean, maybe that does happen, but I haven't seen it.
No, it hasn't. So I met Mike Wilson in the early 2000s when Take-Two had decided to reform the idea of gathering of developers, although it wasn't as it once had been. It was more it was a label at that point. It was just the name rather than the ethic. And they brought Mike back to kind of like try and, I guess, get Mike to reveal the DNA of the original gathering and see if they could actually kind of bring that idea back together, and ultimately they couldn't. I guess the big corporate publisher doesn't really deal very well with random, and gathering was always very, very random. So that's where I met Mike. I mean, I knew who he was beforehand, but that was the first time I sat down with him face to face. And we kind of worked together for about a year at Take-Two, and then we both just drifted away from it. And during that time, I met Harry, who was Mike's long-term business partner. I actually met Harry, bizarrely, in Africa on Kilimanjaro.
As you did.
Yeah. And we spent a lot of time talking to Harry, because when Gathering had sort of folded, he drifted off into other things, and he was at that point living out in Hong Kong. And I kind of asked him, I said, have you ever thought about doing it again? The idea of Gathering. But as Harry pointed out, the biggest stumbling block that you face is you've got the cost of developing your game, whatever that is, and you've got the cost of producing it, because it's a physical world at that point. It's still a physical world. So you're producing a lot of inventory. You have to have salespeople to sell into. So nothing really happened. We all kept talking for a while, and really it's only when Steam comes along that the idea of Devolver kind of can take a form. But at that point, it's really a collection of friends. We'd all, Nigel, Mike, Harry, Rick, all being in Austin. Myself in London at that point. We were all just really good mates. And whenever I would go out I had other jobs in the intervening years. I was doing other things. But whenever I would go to, any show or have the chance to pop into Austin, we'd go and we'd catch up. And so it was actually more like a bunch of mates who just been waiting for their opportunity to.
Yeah. So, what would you describe as the original kind of core essence of Gathering? How would you kind of describe what the goal of it kind of was?
I think Harry and Mike had to have their own company, because there's not a human being alive that can tell Harry Miller what to do. It just doesn't work. He literally rebels from any kind of direction. He's a very entrepreneurial human being, and Mike is a true one-off. I mean, he's just again very, very creative, but he's very collaborative in his approach. Mike loves kind of the community of things being done. So I think really with Mike and Harry, there was the thought of the blend of their natures brings you this idea of collaboration is vital. It's how you can do things. When you're small, you can do more. And Harry's in kind of it's a quality, it's not a negative in his case. It could be a negative for some types of personalities, but with Harry it's a quality. the fact that Harry just will look at any situation and say, well, I want to go that way. And he'll just head off in that direction. And generally he gets it right, which is a relief. So again, I think that's the DNA that it really came from the two of them. And from my perspective and Nigel's perspective, we got to do the thing that you love to do, which is like go out and find some games. Okay.
Yeah. And travel around the world.
And what I love about the world of Devolver is that the games themselves are not being measured in terms of whether there's a huge potential market for it or not. It's actually based on the creativity and the kind of it's got under your skin somehow. You've seen something and it's like an itch. You just want to. So that allows us still to bring games in that may have an incredibly niche appeal.
How do you go about finding them then? So I know a lot of them have started as like game jam things, like Titan Souls, for example, was like that, but not all of them. So are you actively kind of like scouting out? Are you kind of almost like the equivalent of like a little like record label going to?
I think it's a bit like that. I think that's a great analogy. I think Nigel, Andrew, myself, Mike, and Harry are kind of like surfing, listening to radio. If you imagine it, that's the analogy. We're listening to music all the time and we're swapping. So there's a degree of that. There's always something on in the background. There's always someone's looking to, it might be Nigel just drifting through Twitter. It might be Andrew going to a show in Spain. So I'd say that a lot of the games also find us. Francois, who made Reigns, what he said was that when he was looking at Reigns, and although we ourselves had never published an app, we've never done anything like that, we're PC focused, he actually said that he thought it was a Devolver game. That's why he pitched us, which actually ironically is true, because as soon as Nigel got a build up on Test Flight, he was just so excited. So I think that there's the developers themselves who are looking at, I'd say the smart developers are looking at who they want to imagine is going to publish their game and what they're going to get from that relationship. So yeah, there's a real, we are looking, but we're only doing a small number of games at any given time, and we've got developers who are pitching, and generally most of the games we've ended up with, when it's come through the developers pitching us, it's often, strangely enough, we've often known about them, or we've seen something of them, or there's been someone in the group who's like, oh yeah, I've been following them, I've been checking them out. So
yeah. So has that made your job kind of, has Devolver's growing status over the years made your life, the company's life, a little easier when it comes to finding great games, because you've got that status now where people want to work with you as a priority?
That's a really good question. I feel, there's by the sheer number of people that approach us and game pitches that we get, it can feel like we're repetitively saying the same thing to people, which is we're not saying no to your game, we're not saying no to the idea. We're actually saying we haven't got any capacity. We just don't have the bandwidth to do more than a few projects any given time. And that's the hard part, I find. That's the hard part, because it always, no matter how you try and answer, I suspect it always feels like a negative, like you're actually rejecting something rather than you just genuinely haven't got the capacity. The number of people that pitches kind of varies enormously. I mean, around shows like GDC, as you'd imagine, there's a lot of people getting in touch. But generally, those people that you're kind of like intrigued and you wonder if you could get a chance to work with them. There's been a few of those in the last couple of years that have got in touch, or we've got in touch, and yeah, things have come from that, which is brilliant. And yeah, I guess that's because we're seen to be doing well.
Yeah. So it does work the other way, because most people would think of it as though it's working with someone like yourselves would the relationship would be in that direction. You'd be the one that they'd be aspiring to work with, but it does work the other way as well.
Oh yeah, it definitely works the other way. I mean, we still have the wide-eyed fanboy kind of culture. If you hear Andrew and Nigel talking about certain developers, the frisson of excitement's almost sexual. So there's definitely there's quite a long list of people we would love to get the chance to work with.
Yeah. So how do you then balance that between wanting to, like you were saying before, that you wanted to stay small and mobile? Is there a temptation to kind of abandon that to a sense that you can work with more of these people?
No, I mean the feeling that we've had about ourselves is that we work well in a kind of small form. To this day, it still means that each person is handling all kinds of different disciplines. It's more project driven. So if Andrew right now working on a certain project will be handling everything from QA, localization, milestones, PR, asset creation, dealing with console partners, dealing with every aspect of it. And I think that's something that we all find we enjoy. I think also it's not a lack of ambition that says we're staying small. It's actually an ambition to stay small. We don't want to grow. There's a certain kind of family feel to the whole thing, which probably is most obvious when you see the E3 kind of everyone together at the lot. You just have this, and often and increasingly it's the case that the Devolver lot will be full of developers that we're not working with.
Yeah.
But we have maybe worked with previously, but we all still hang out.
Yeah. So do you I guess that I'd imagine that the kind of family atmosphere that you have kind of mimics a lot of the working structures that the studios and the people that you work with, the games designers and developers that you work with have. They're small teams. They want to create what they want to create. They want to stay mobile. Do you ever get a sense that that's kind of adds to the attraction for them and kind of makes them put more trust in you that they might otherwise not put in a bigger company?
Yeah, there's been a couple of manifestations which on a certain level have actually caused us a degree of concern. Recently one of the developers we're working with on a project that's yet to be announced, you could sense they were beginning to stress, and the project's relatively early, so usually that stress will manifest itself at some point, but not usually at the start. And you kind of you try and get to the bottom of it. What is it that's causing this? And what it was they'd convinced themselves that they would make the game that would fail, and it would reflect badly on us. They would be the developer that released the bad game, and that was kind of like slightly concerning, because we, as we said to them, it's like, first and foremost, that's not something that we would ever be concerned about. We'd only be concerned about you enjoying the process of getting to the end, and whatever help we can give, we give. But it was, we did talk about that, and we wondered if that kind of tension exists in some of the developers, where they're worried that in some way, shape or form they've got to sort of like deliver something of such a high, achingly high quality, otherwise we'd be disappointed. And we're like, well, actually no, it's a complicated thing making a video game, and things don't always go smoothly.
Yeah.
So again, I think what I've seen, my observation over the last 5 or 6 years, is that really strong friendships have grown out of these connections that have been made through being at E3 or GDC or PAX, showing games. So the guys from Roll7 and the guys from Dennaton, they're really close friends. the guys from Free Lives, they're all mixed in, and you know, half of what they get up to we've no clue. But I think, you know, what is very helpful is they all share their builds with each other. They all discuss these things. I know that, you know, in a game that we're about to release, Strafe, that some of the guys who work on Absolver over in Paris had given the guys at Pixel Titans some advice on UI and how to integrate controller support. I didn't know anything about that until it just casually got mentioned to me a few days ago. I was like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess that's a part of it that people don't necessarily think of, that when, because you do travel to shows and the games that you're working on, the creators of those games do kind of hang out a lot. There is a big kind of knowledge sharing community there, so it kind of makes them better, or at least gives them the chance to be a more knowledgeable or a
Absolutely.
better.
And I mean, Devolver has got access to kind of like, you know, the rock stars of our world would be Croteam, you know, and you've got these incredibly gifted, storied developers, and of course when you do put them all together, you know, you get someone like Alan from Croteam who'll be sitting there talking about how they developed the Talos principle, how they worked out, you know, and you can see some of the other developers sort of like sitting there and they're soaking it all up. You know, and you've got the guys from, you know, Flying Wild Hog, the Shadow Warrior team, and that's a big developer full of very, very experienced guys. So again, if you've got someone who's 19 or 20 and they're sitting next to someone who's worked on The Witcher, you can tell straight away they're going to be like, give me as much information as I can possibly elicit.
Yeah. Do you personally see their kind of artistic and technical qualities improve? I mean, how much does Devolver know, for example, how much does the knowledge base of Devolver cover the technicalities of games?
So it's like, thank God for Andrew. I mean, Andrew, in his background, Andrew's done level design, sound design. He's worked within the development world on at least 3 projects. When I first met Andrew, he designed his own game. From our perspective, he's our producer effectively. But Harry's got a pretty strong technical, you know, insight, knowledge base. Mine is much more surface. But I think we've got enough. But we also recognise that, you know, we don't try and insert ourselves into the development process. And what you tend to find, if you mentioned Titan Souls, if you look at the game that started out life in the game jam and what came out, you know, a year or so later, the iteration and the way that they developed that game shows that they're learning as they're developing, you know, the across all the disciplines. And that's been my experience of a lot of the, let's say, the smaller projects, you know, like Gods We Watching or All Sometimes Monsters. And, the actual core team are actually soaking up a lot of information and knowledge, but they're trying and failing, and as they do that, the game starts to take shape. And as you mentioned, when you pull together a book, you have a lot of stuff left at the end that you haven't used. You know? And I think every single video game, if you looked at all the sheer number of levels that John Ribbons built for Not a Hero that never got used, never saw the light of day, or all the fight animations that never got used, it's just extraordinary.
If you're interested in more insight and knowledge on game design and game designers, then do make sure you check out Independent by Design, Art and Stories of Indie Game Creation. It's a hardback book that's written by us, and it combines inside stories that focus on specific studios and individuals with compelling pages of original artwork and concept documents. The whole thing is informed by tens of hours of original interviews. Graeme has already mentioned the likes of Croteam, Dennaton, Roll7 and Acid Nerve, all of which are featured within the book. Additionally, Lucas Pope, the creator of Papers, Please, Subset Games of FTL fame, Vlambeer, the team that bought you Nuclear Throne, and Train Jam founder Adriel Wallach are also included, as are many, many more. Just go to indiebydesign.net to get your copy today. You can also follow us on Twitter at indiebydesign and on Facebook by going to facebook.com/independentbydesign. Our website, as well as also being a portal through which to listen to our podcast and buy our book, is also full of interesting editorial content for you to read. Again, that's at indiebydesign.net. Finally, we'd be very grateful if you could take a moment to leave us a friendly review on iTunes. It really does help our visibility, and in turn that helps us get the show to more people and spread general understanding about game design and the people behind the games. We begin the second half of our chat with Graeme by discussing Croteam, the makers of the Serious Sam games that made up Devolver's first 3 releases as a publisher.
Without Croteam, we would have found it much more difficult to get airborne. We started the company with no money, with no ability or desire to borrow money or have any investors or any of that. So it's I think for pretty much the first 3 years, every one of us was doing second jobs. I think Nigel was the first to actually bravely step away from having a proper job and starting to work for Devolver full time. So Croteam, with the HD remakes of the original games, which then led to the gaining enough funding, if you want to take from the sales of those games, gaining enough momentum to fund Serious Sam 3 to completion, and also brought us into the indie space when the idea of letting other developers make Serious Sam games, which led to Vlambeer, and from Vlambeer it leads directly to Dennaton, and Dennaton leads to us being able to all jump on the company and stop doing second jobs and work full time. So to us, Croteam is it's just inextricably linked to Devolver.
So, and you used the word indie there, which is such a loaded term
it is now.
Nowadays.
It is now, isn't it? Yeah.
Do you have a... because different people have different definitions. Some people might be it's you got to do every single element of the game yourself. You've got to remove any sort of outside funding. If you've got too many team members, then you're not indie. Do you have a?
I grew up in a period of time where people tried to claim that they were the first to ever hear Joy Division, and it got to the point it was so obtuse as to who was the biggest Joy Division fan at school. And it got boring. And I just liked the music. So, whatever. To me, the way I look at independence is if you're a creator and you're able to fulfill your desire to make the thing you want to make without anybody telling you what to do, then you're independent. And that's how I've always that's the capsule I put around independent, is that you're making the decisions on what you want to do. And, because again, we do work with single man teams, and we work with teams that are in the case of Flying Wild Hog, I guess they're hovering around about 100 people. But they're fiercely independent. And obviously in between there's this sort of like teams from 4 to 40. So, but they would all consider themselves independent.
So it's a more a philosophical definition than a quantitative.
I think it's a state of mind in some regards.
So where then would you say Devolver's position is in that, in terms of when you're working with these independent studios? You said that it's about them having freedom to do what they like. So a traditional sort of a big publisher might be kind of informing or suggesting changes based on maybe some greater financial gain over the long term. But,
sure.
if you're not doing that, then what would you say your kind of what do they get out of their relationship with you? I suppose is the question.
Well, to some extent, it's a question that will be different for each person. The answer will be different for each person, I should say. With some of the teams we've worked with, I would say that really ultimately what they got was breathing space, and that's where the funding comes in. So by having certainty of funding, by having someone who's prepared to do that, they can go off and concentrate fully on what they want to make. And in a couple of cases, I'm not exaggerating when I say that we've signed the game, and the next time we've spoken to the developer about the game itself, is when it's practically done. So we have not been sitting here analysing builds or doing any of that. But equally, there are quite a number of projects where the developer wants to send you builds frequently. They want you to play the builds. They want you to give feedback, and they're anxious to have that feedback. And they're also doing the same, sending it to other development teams themselves. So it really does depend massively on the individual studio. What is important always to anyone in business, because it is a bit, that's the word I hate, whilst I hate the word itself, it is a business. To be creative, to get, to my mind anyway, to be as creative as possible, you have to have the least amount of distraction in your life. And financial uncertainty does make it very difficult for people to fully concentrate. If you're worried about paying rent and all the things that go with that, then it's very hard to just go and focus on being creative. We do genuinely have the best interests of everybody we're involved with, and I think that does come through when we're working with people, that they understand that we've got their back as best we possibly can, whatever that might mean at any given time. So
yeah. Does that irritate a little? Because the financial side's almost like a naivety or an immaturity, maybe, when some people are kind of complaining or suggesting that in order to profit from what you're doing kind of somehow undermines, certainly in some people's eyes, the word indie, but just like a kind of artistic, creative thing at all, because, obviously the obvious kind of opposite of that is that if you don't have any money, you can't sustain what you're doing.
Again, usually the construct of that thinking is so obtuse to me that it's difficult to. It's a bit like trying to convince someone who voted for Britain to leave Europe that they're an idiot. You kind of like, they don't believe they're an idiot.
Yeah, sure.
In the I think this is our 9th year, and in that time, we've got to see companies, which, obviously to us that's individuals, but it's easier just to say companies. We've seen companies establish themselves, build a very solid platform for their future, and become truly financially independent. They have no need to look around for funding. They can now do what they want with the funds they've generated out of their success. To me, that kind of like is the best illustration I have of our role. We've got involved. We've profited, of course we have, but they've gained through their hard work and our initial support absolute independence. That's and if they then choose later on to work with us again, there must be a reason why they're making that choice, because they certainly don't need us for money. So there must be something else they feel comes out of the relationship that's beyond just dollar bills moving from one bank account to another. And it's public. When we get involved with a game, we have no rights beyond that game. We're not tied into any future with the developer. We're not signing up an IP with sequel rights that we kind of like. We don't own the IP, but we've got the sequel rights for the next 10 years or something.
Yeah.
So the developer, at the point that their game is launched, there's no hidden little knot that holds them to us. And actually, that's as important to us as it is to them, because we don't want to be tied to any one thing either.
Yeah. So do you, if you cease to work with a creator in the future after you've worked with them, do you continue to have a relationship with them? So Vlambeer kind of went off by themselves.
Yeah,
afterwards.
I guess the best one the best illustration I can give you is Roll7, and we worked with them on Not a Hero. We also got involved in releasing Ollie Ollie. We were not the publisher of Ollie Ollie, but we did release versions of it on Steam. And it's a bit of a romance for me with John Ribbons. He's become a really close friend. Simon and Tom I don't see as frequently because they don't live in London. But I genuinely love those guys. And when, after we finished on Not a Hero, they pitched us their next project, which we all love, but we couldn't afford it. And it's one of those ones you look at, and the way that we looked at it was we could probably stretch to accommodate the development as it was explained to us at that particular point. But here's the risk: if we stretch ourselves to that degree, what if the game, and that's not a bitchy comment, it's just a reality, what if the game slips by maybe 3, 4, 5 months because it just takes more time? But equally, we're leveraging everything, and that made us all uncomfortable because we would be putting them at risk as well. So it was really difficult for me because I had to say to the guys, we can't stay with you on this one. But equally, when they signed with another publisher, I don't think there was anyone, I think in the tier of happiness that they'd signed with another publisher. Obviously they were delighted they've got a deal, they're going to be making the game they want to make, and obviously they're ecstatic. And I think the next level of happiness came from us. We were delighted. And I'll hate John Ribbons when his game comes out and it sells millions of copies, because it will be, I believe he'll make an awesome game.
Yeah. So it's that thing of, you can't put too much money on a personal friendship, because it has the potential to kind of blow everything up.
Yeah, I guess, I never really thought of it from that point of view, but it was more, in this particular situation, it was more a case of as much as we wanted, there's an expression I used to use when I was working in retail, you have buyer's eyes, you see something and you just want it. Yeah. And you have to remember that you can't always have everything that you want. Yeah. So yeah, I still blame John for making an expensive game. Basically, it's his fault.
Why couldn't he? What was wrong with Not a Hero? What was wrong with Ollie?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's, his delusions of ambition.
So when you're giving people a kind of complete creative freedom, they're doing a project they want to do, they've agreed a deal with you, it's for them to get on and do it now. Has that ever caused any discomfort for you? And what I'm really thinking about here is when all the controversy about the kind of sexual violence around Hotline Miami 2, for example, and then Dennaton are saying, well, if they're not going to sell it in X country, then just go and pirate copies yourselves, just do whatever you want. Is there ever any moments like that, or other times when you maybe think, okay, maybe that wasn't such a great thing to say?
No, I think, again, nature and personality comes into it, and when Jonathan tweeted that, I was kind of high five. That's fine with us. I think I think it got picked up in the media. Jonathan had tweeted it, and then Devolver and Fort Parker were tweeting it. So it was kind of a bit odd to have a publisher doing that, I guess, from a media perspective. If you say to people, look, you have creative freedom, you're doing what you want to do, we're supporting you, you then don't get to complain about what comes. You don't get to reverse course. There have been a number of occasions when we've seen things within the game, a game that's being developed, and we've actually just said, look, let's have a discussion. And that discussion is going to lead you into certain situations. And as long as you're aware of that, and as long as you're comfortable with that, that's fine. Because equally there are times when you have cultural differences. We had one developer whose English is, at that particular, their English now is fantastic, but at that particular point, we were naive. We put them in E3 in a caravan facing the media. And as anyone who knows Devolver, we're not in those caravans, which is the developer and the journalist, which is as it should be, right? But in this particular case, a word was used which in French is an entirely everyday word, but the journalist heard it from the point of view of a prescription. It blew up in our faces, and we all sat outside the caravan a few hours later because it went straight online, and I was like, it's my fault. That's me not doing my job. I should have made it clear to everybody that they don't speak great English, that they may struggle, and if there's anything that they say, that because the content of the game, there's a lot of adult themes within the game, if there's anything that raises your eyebrow, you can check with me because I speak a bit of French, and I can probably just make sure that that everyone understood what they were saying, right? So sometimes there are cultural things that have happened.
Yeah.
But no, I'm fine with, I think creative people can stretch boundaries, and I know that this is always difficult because if you're left wing, you don't want to see right wing people stretching boundaries, and if you're right wing, you don't want to see left people stretching boundaries, and we all kind of get a little bit frazzled about where we think that line.
Yeah. If you are a small team and people are speaking English almost exclusively, maybe cultural things like that are unforeseen issues that you wouldn't have ever even thought about might even be something that ever exists.
Yep.
Have there been other things like that you've been just totally blindsided by, that you didn't see coming as a small team?
Well, actually, although it didn't affect us, Devolver, that is. I was in Warsaw, and the Warsaw development scene is very, very tight knit. I love it for that. I mean, all these great developers, they all hang out. They're all, in fact, it seems everybody at some point has worked on The Witcher or Bulletstorm. But I was there when, if you recall, on Witcher 3, there was this sort of slant appeared in the media about the fact that this game was white. Everyone in it was white, and I mean the way that the tone of the original article, I don't think was particularly grim. But of course, once the internet gets involved, you go off in all kinds of directions, and then there's people jumping in. Sitting in Warsaw with those people, the guys from Flying Wild Hog and a few people from CD Projekt, they were just genuinely bemused. They were like, it's set in Poland. The universe of The Witcher is this part of the world. So this is a representation of this part of the world, and and of course, sitting there, I wasn't being devil's advocate. I was just saying, well, this is like, we see the world now from the prism of diversity. We see the world from the prism of equality, and so if you're taken in isolation and seen to be exclusively one thing, as we see, I mean, it's happening constantly in film and TV. We're discussing this, but it wasn't a conversation that had been going on in Warsaw because this had never actually come up. So I got to see that unfold, and it was really interesting to kind of they felt a little bit like they were being picked on for something that they couldn't understand anyone even being remotely bothered by.
Does that kind of indicate perhaps that games have kind of arrived in a way? Like if people are bothered about talking about this stuff in video games, it does indicate and kind of demonstrate that games are worthy enough and mainstream enough and kind of culturally relevant enough to be spoken about in these kind of political contexts.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I think whilst it might bring some scrutiny that's irritating, overall the benefit is good. I think it's welcome. So it is kind of I guess we really have. I mean, I opened up the Guardian the other day and I found an article about Dean Hall and the come and work in New Zealand and have unlimited vacation, and there's like a really sizable article on page. I think it was on the third page. I was like, wow, did not expect to see that there. So
and then I suppose related to that, there's also been a lot of in the last few years, certainly with digital distribution taking off and Steam being so popular and people releasing their own games and itch being a platform to distribute your game on. There are just so many more games now. I mean, there's just huge numbers of games. And I suppose that, in a way, that kind of makes it's a double-edged sword from someone like Devolver's position. There's so many games to look at and trawl through, but also from the consumer level and from the developer level, just getting the visibility to match between consumer and developer must be much more difficult. Like to simply stand out from the crowd is very, very difficult. So would you, because of your status, would you see more people wanting to work with someone like you because it does give you that status at things like E3 and Gamescom and things like that, but also, the Devolver brand is a much bigger entity?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I don't think that we don't approach any project and think, oh, we're Devolver, we're hitmakers, so if we sign this game and we sprinkle the Devolver magic dust, that it's going to then sell hugely, or that all the media will flock around it and every streamer of note will want to be involved. I think we approach each game as if this was the first project, and it's always kept us honest in that regard, because if you've got a game like Stories Untold, it's a classic old school kind of like text based adventure. Well, I guess we look at that from the perspective of it's probably quite a niche game. It might catch attention because it's got that kind of like 80s vibe going through it. It's got some the art style is really, really cool, but it doesn't mean because we got involved with that game that somehow multiplies its sales, and suddenly that game that might now sell 5 times more than if we'd not been involved. I don't think that's true. And what I do think is true, however, is because we've got a really good network of people like Robbie from Indigo Pearl, we've got Doug down in Australia from Double Jump, we've got Zach in Japan, and these people are able to reach out to the media, and they themselves have a credibility in how they conduct themselves and how they do their work, that I think the media are more receptive to their kind of like engagement because they trust them and they've built a relationship over a number of years, and we benefit from that, clearly. So obviously I guess the difference that maybe Stories Untold has with Devolver is that there's 9 people scattered across the globe who are in contact in their specific territory, region, with the media, and they can say, hey guys, we've got this, are you interested in having a look? Whereas had that just been John and Omar up in Glasgow on their own, I mean, they could access things like, there are various mechanisms for getting review code out there, but I've been on the other side of that fence, and if you get 10 emails a day with review code, chances of you picking one of those 10 is pretty low. Whereas if Robbie gets in touch and says, hey, I think this is a game you're going to enjoy, it's a much better chance that you will make some elbow room sometime. So that's it.
So with people like Indigo Pearl and Robbie, who's part of that kind of, do you have the same kind of relationship with them as you do with the games creators, or is it?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And Stephanie Tinsley over in the States, North America, she was the first person that we worked with, and she worked with us when we couldn't pay her. And as time went on, we were able to add, Robbie obviously is very much part of it. Salima and Pilu over in France, they were very early in our joining with us. I think it's fair to say on their behalf that they themselves have all become really strong friends. They're part of the travelling circus. Robbie's very close to Dennis at Dennaton and John Ribbons, and so you see them all together, and they're all, and the guys that you mentioned, Acid Nerve, Mark and David, they all hang out. In fact, I think sometimes I feel like Dad when I walk in the room. They all sort of like quiet down a little bit, and then I have to go, do I?
Yeah.
So the fun continues.
Yeah. Leave the card behind the bar.
Yeah. Yes, do that. But please go. So no, they're a big part of our story.
Yeah. And the streamer angle as well, is that something you're actively concentrating more on? Are you kind of staying abreast of the kind of the changes in how video game journalism and communication to audiences is evolving? Yeah,
I mean, we've got the Devolver Public Access channel, and we're about to add to that. Actually, we've been running that now for, I guess, we've been running it formally, I'd say, now for about 6 or 7 months, and next month we're going to add a couple of French guys to the team, because we want to start streaming in French, and hopefully not long after that in German. And I think, again, my daughter, she's just hit 15, and I've got a child that doesn't watch television and just wouldn't even think of switching on a TV. It's just not what she does. I mean, I've never actually seen her watching TV. I've seen her watch movies, but I've not seen her just come in and hit that remote control. And her and her friends, their way of entertaining themselves is through the prism of YouTube, and they have their own favourites who they watch, and that's how they inform themselves. I mean, Nina's not so much in the gaming space, but it's how she informs herself about music. And as a parent, you look at it and it's bewildering sometimes. You're like, God, it's just moving so quickly, as you mentioned. But it's also, again, it's for us, it's a small company. It does allow you to reach potentially quite a wide audience. And yeah, so we're going to continue with Devolver Public Access, and add to it, as well as working with streamers at large.
Yeah. And what part in that new evolving communications space does Fork Parker play? I mean, who is Fork Parker, and what's?
I think firstly, Fork Parker's having a bit of a hard time at the moment, because being an elderly man with a ridiculous hairstyle and some fairly dubious points of view was a space that he occupied relatively well, and he's just been completely usurped.
Yeah.
So I think Fork's having a little bit of an identity crisis. I don't expect him to emerge as a liberal in any way, shape or form, but he's clearly he's having to reassess his brand at the moment, because he's not getting very far.
Is it possible to push it far enough to go beyond the elephant in the room?
I genuinely don't know. I mean, I know that it's a different story, but many years ago, I remember the director of the Bourne films said that the reason he stopped was because the real world had become way more ludicrous than anything they had in the Bourne films. That their idea of this dark, secretive, shadowy government within government was usurped by drones flying all over and assassinating people left and right. And so it's the end of Bourne, right? Because the real world is more ridiculous than the one they were trying to imagine. And that's where Fort Parker's at the minute. He's been kind of blindsided. So I don't know. I mean, he's obviously not struggling for cash.
No, clearly.
He can continue his lavish lifestyle.
Yeah. So he's a real person then.
He's so real to us that it's scary.
A slightly different topic, but when you were mentioning stories untold, it's
just to be clear, it's taken me over 20 years to finally have a developer in my own hometown.
Is that does that add to the appeal of?
I pretty much would have crawled over broken glass to. Well, it's the first time I work with people who understand everything I say.
That's true. Yeah, I hope people understand this.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, but games like that, not games like that, but that is an example of a game, along with something like always sometimes monsters that you mentioned previously. That's both of those games are very different from what people would have seen as early Devolver. So Serious Sam was a shooter, Hotline Miami, completely different game, but also involved shooting. Has there been change, a conscious desire to kind of broaden the kinds of games that you're looking at?
Personally, I don't feel that is the case. I feel that we've always been slightly, it's a quality in our case, but we've been slightly kind of like attention order deficit, kind of as a group of people. We're very easily distracted by things in that sense. And so, and as I say, you've got, as a group of people, whilst we're all very, very close, we also have quite divergent interests, so, I mean, I don't think I would ever imagine that I would ever have even pitched a Downwell or Range to the rest of the group, because I don't play games on mobile phones. They just don't. That doesn't appeal to me. I've never had a mobile phone the battery can stand up to it anyway. So if Francois pitched me in, and maybe A Hero had pitched me, I might have just said to them, guys, we don't do mobile, but these games are cool, they're fun, but it's just not for us. Whereas Nigel, who's younger and better looking and has hair, he does play a lot of games on mobile. And these games are so tight. They just got that, and so that's an example of coming through one door and everything's great. Come through another door, you meet me, and I'm like, I don't do mobile. Conversely, Andrew's got, I think Andrew's the most AAA of us. He loves video games and he plays a lot of really big games. He's a massive fan of Dishonored and Assassin's Creed, and so he's got a slightly different slant. So when Absolver came along, I guess I was a little bit scared by the size of the game and the size of the team, and thinking, God, that's a big group of people, and that's a big project. But Andrew was just this is awesome, and he was straight into that and just right underneath the hood, talking to the designers, the programmers, the artists. He said, "This is awesome, got to do it." So each one of us has got a slightly different slant. I'm not sure what my slant is.
Yeah, I was going to. Apart from games made in Glasgow, and I know you're a big Liverpool fan as well. So if there was a Liverpool game, maybe that would be high on you.
Yeah, if there could be a game that was funded by Kenny Dalglish in some way, shape or form, I'm in.
For more on games and game creators, visit indiebydesign.net and follow us on Twitter @indiebydesign. Indie by Design podcast episodes are released every Wednesday. Our next episode features Introversion Software, creators of Prison Architect, Uplink, Darwinia, and more. All music for this episode was provided and is owned by Ben Prunty.